I want you to imagine this. I want you to close your eyes and transport yourself into a high-rise apartment in a major metropolitan center. The view is panoramic. The furniture is Italian leather. The safe in the wall is open, revealing stacks of cash, bonds, and perhaps a few tubes of silver eagles. By all traditional accounting standards, the person standing in this room is wealthy. They have liquidity. They have assets. They have net worth. Now, look closer at the occupant. Look at the sunken eyes. Look at the trembling hands. Listen to the silence of the city below, a silence that is not peaceful, but predatory. This individual has not eaten a protein-rich meal in 14 days. He is holding a stack of currency that could have bought a luxury sedan 3 months ago. Today, he is staring at it, realizing that this paper, this intricate cotton blend fabric with dead presidents printed on it, contains 0 calories. He tries to trade a stack of it for a can of peaches with a neighbor, and the neighbor laughs. The neighbor does not want the liquidity. The neighbor wants to survive. This is not fiction dystopia. This is a forensic reconstruction of a crime scene that is played out in Sarajevo in the 1990s, in Zimbabwe in the 2000s, and in Venezuela just a few short years ago. We are performing an autopsy on a society that died of starvation while drowning in money. The clinical diagnosis here is what I call caloric insolvency. Most people do not understand that the financial system is merely an abstraction layer, sitting on top of a biological reality. When we strip away the stock tickers and the algorithmic trading bots, the economy is simply energy transfer. It is calories moving from soil to mouth. And right now, we are living in a civilization that has completely forgotten the fragility of that transfer. Let us look at the mathematics of the supply chain. This is where the autopsy gets brutal. Our modern cities operate on a just-in-time delivery system. This is a term from efficiency management, but in a forensic context, it is a death warrant. It means that at any given moment, your local grocery store holds only about 3 days of inventory. That is 72 hours between civilization and anarchy. The trucks that replenish those shelves are the red blood cells of the economy. They require diesel. They require drivers who are willing to accept the currency in exchange for their labor. Now, imagine a hyperinflationary event. This is the stroke that kills the patient. The currency begins to lose value at a rate of 10% per hour. The truck driver looks at his paycheck and realizes that by the time he drives the route, the money he earns will not buy enough fuel to drive himself home. So, he parks the truck. The red blood cells stop moving. The oxygen stops reaching the organs. The shelves in the city go bare in 48 hours. Suddenly, your portfolio of tech stocks is irrelevant. Your Bitcoin cold storage is irrelevant if the power grid fails due to a lack of maintenance. The only asset class that retains par value in this scenario is the one asset that actually produces biological energy. We are talking about the soil. We are talking about the caloric yield of an acre. But here is the contrarian truth that most investment gurus will never tell you, because it does not sell newsletters. In the acute phase of a collapse, precious metals have a fatal flaw. You cannot eat gold. If you walk into a starving village with a bar of gold, you might get a bag of potatoes for it, if you are lucky. You have just traded an ounce of gold, theoretically worth $2,000, for $5 worth of starch. That is a 99.7% loss on your investment in real terms. Why? Because the potato keeps you alive for another day. The gold is just a heavy yellow rock that requires a functioning market to have value. We need to dissect the psychology of the nominal illusion. This is the mental disorder that affects populations before the crash. People believe they are rich because the numbers in their bank accounts are high. In Weimar Germany, people were billionaires. They were pushing wheelbarrows full of marks to the bakery. But they were starving. The nominal value of their wealth was infinite, but the real value, the purchasing power in terms of calories, was zero. The math is ruthless. The average life expectancy of a fiat currency is 27 years. We are statistically overdue for a systemic organ failure. When that failure happens, the definition of asset shifts violently from "what can I sell" to "what can keep me warm and fed." Now, follow me deeper into the autopsy. When the population realizes that money is dead, panic sets in. This is the moment the Ouroboros financial cycle begins to devour itself. The government cannot print food. They can print vouchers. They can print stimulus checks. They can print digital credits. But they cannot print a single grain of wheat. So what do? History gives us a very clear, very bloody playbook. When the capital city is starving, the government does not negotiate with the rural producers. They do not offer fair market value. They confiscate. This is the critical warning of this autopsy. If you think owning farmland is a passive safety net, you are naive. In the Soviet Union, during the Holodomor, the farmers who actually knew how to grow food were labeled kulaks and hoarders. Their grain was seized at gunpoint to feed the cities. The people who produced the calories were the first to be liquidated by the state apparatus. Why? Because food is not just a commodity. Food is political power. Control the food, and you control the population. If the supply chain breaks, the government will declare a state of emergency. They will implement price controls, which is the economic equivalent of trying to cure a fever by smashing the thermometer. It does not lower the temperature. It just blinds you to the severity of the infection. Price controls lead to immediate shortages. Shortages lead to rationing. Rationing leads to search and seizure operations. We are seeing the early symptoms of this necrosis right now. Look at the rising cost of fertilizer. Look at the attacks on nitrogen usage in agriculture across Europe. This is not about the environment. This is about the centralization of the caloric supply. They are tightening the tourniquet around the independent production of food. If you are holding paper assets, you are holding a claim on a system that is bankrupt. If you are holding gold, you are holding a store of value for the reconstruction phase, years later. But for the survival phase, the phase where the body count rises, the only currency is the calorie. I want you to verify that you are following this diagnosis. I want to know who here understands the difference between nominal wealth and biological survival. Drop a helicopter emoji in the comments right now. Let me know that you are hovering above the chaos, monitoring the liquidity injection, and that you are ready to face the brutal reality of what happens when the trucks stop moving. We are not done. We have only just opened the chest cavity. Now we need to look at the specific mechanism of how they will come for your pantry, and why a stockpile of Bic lighters might be worth more than a stack of Berkshire Hathaway stock. Stay focused. The autopsy continues. I want you to imagine the silence. Not the quiet of a library, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a distribution center that has lost its pulse. Imagine standing in aisle 4 of your local grocery store, 48 hours after the credit markets freeze. The fluorescent lights are flickering on emergency power, casting long, sickly shadows over the shelves. What you see is not a shortage. What you see is the terminal corpse of the just-in-time delivery system. The bread aisle is stripped bare, leaving only the smell of yeast and desperation. The meat counter is beginning to smell of something else entirely, because the refrigeration units failed 6 hours ago. You are holding a stack of $100 bills, or perhaps a gold coin, or a certificate of stock ownership in a company that produces microchips. And as you stand there, watching a mother fight a stranger for the last dented can of peaches, you realize the most brutal equation of our existence. You realize that you cannot eat your portfolio. We are performing an autopsy on the illusion of food security. Most of you operate under the hallucination that food is a constant, a guaranteed utility like gravity. You believe that because the shelves have been full for the entirety of your life, they will remain full in perpetuity. This is what we call normalcy bias in forensic pathology. It is the brain's refusal to accept a traumatic shifting of reality until the trauma is already inflicting physical damage. But the pathology of the modern food system is terminal. We have built a global supply chain that operates on razor-thin margins, entirely dependent on cheap diesel, functioning credit lines, and digital logistics. It is a circulatory system that has been stretched so thin that a single laceration causes the entire organism to bleed out. Let us look at the mathematics of this necrosis. The average major city holds only enough food to feed its population for 3 days, 72 hours. That is the timeline between civilization and savagery. 9 meals. We are not talking about a slow decline here. We are talking about a cliff. When the trucks stop moving, whether due to a cyber attack on the grid, a hyperinflationary spike in fuel costs, or a sovereign debt default that freezes the letters of credit used to import grain, the city becomes a prison. It becomes a calorie desert. Now, consider the asset class you are currently ignoring. You are obsessed with the price of Bitcoin or the yield on the 10-year Treasury bond. But in a true systemic collapse, the valuation model flips upside down. We enter a period of caloric currency. In this environment, a Bic lighter is not a piece of cheap plastic. It is a portable Promethean device. It is the ability to create fire, to sterilize water, to cook raw meat, to ward off hypothermia. A single Bic lighter, which costs less than $2 today, will trade for more than an ounce of silver when the grid is down for a month. Why? Because utility trumps speculation when survival is the only metric. An ounce of silver cannot boil water. A share of Apple stock cannot cauterize a wound. A box of generic antibiotics, amoxicillin or ciprofloxacin, will be worth more than a luxury sedan. This is not hyperbole. This is the historical precedent of Sarajevo in the 90s. This is Venezuela in 2018. The market does not care about your net worth. The market cares about your biological viability. But here is the incision point where we find the true cause of death for your personal sovereignty. You assume that if you prepare, if you stockpile, you will be safe. You assume that your pantry is your private property. This is a fatal legal error. We need to examine the forensic evidence of government overreach. In the United States, we have a legal instrument known as Executive Order 13603. I want you to look it up after this briefing. It is titled National Defense Resources Preparedness. Most people read the title and fall asleep. That is by design. But if you read the fine print, if you dissect the legalese, you find the mechanism for total confiscation. This order grants the federal government the authority to seize all food resources, all farm equipment, all fuel, and all water distribution systems in the event of a national emergency. They do not call it theft. They call it allocation. They call it resource management for the continuity of government. When the crisis hits, when the caloric deficit becomes a national security threat, do not think for 1 second that the state will allow you to sit on a mountain of rice and beans while the population starves. They will not see you as a prudent citizen. They will define you as a hoarder. They will define you as an enemy of the collective. The history of famine is not just a history of bad weather. It is a history of confiscation. The Holodomor in Ukraine was not caused by a lack of grain. It was caused by men with guns coming to take the grain from the farmers who grew it. The autopsy reveals a clear pattern. The state always eats first. The military eats second. The essential bureaucracy eats third. You and your family are not on that list. This brings us to the concept of the Ouroboros of hunger. As the food supply tightens, the government will implement price controls. They always do. They will dictate that a loaf of bread must cost $2, even though the wheat required to bake it costs $10. The result is instant mathematical failure. Producers stop producing because they lose money on every unit. The black market explodes. The official shelves go empty, and the real economy moves into the shadows, into the alleyways where a can of tuna costs a wedding ring. You need to understand the caloric density of your assets. A gold bar has 0 calories. A stack of cash has 0 calories. Your crypto wallet has 0 calories. If you cannot convert those assets into proteins and fats within a 4-hour window, they are effectively worthless during the acute phase of the collapse. The acute phase is the period of maximum violence. It is the period where the realization sets in that help is not coming. During this phase, the only thing that matters is energy. Energy to keep your body warm. Energy to keep your brain functioning so you do not make a fatal tactical error. Energy to defend what is yours. We are looking at a system that is incredibly efficient, but incredibly fragile. We have sacrificed resilience for efficiency. We have removed all the slack from the line. There are no strategic grain reserves for the average citizen. There are no neighborhood silos. There is only the supermarket, and the supermarket is a lie. It is a stage set designed to make you feel safe. Behind the curtain, there is nothing but a complex web of promises, debt, and diesel fuel. If one of those 3 strands snaps, the lights go out, and the hunger begins. So, when I ask you to conduct a forensic audit of your own life, I am not asking about your retirement account. I am asking about your caloric runway. How many days can you survive without leaving your home? How many days can you sustain your metabolic baseline without swiping a credit card? If the answer is less than 90 days, you are already a statistic. You are a walking casualty waiting for the event to happen. The government knows this. They have run the simulations. They know that society is only 3 meals away from anarchy. That is why they have the executive orders ready. That is why they have the ability to nationalize the food supply chain with the stroke of a pen. They are preparing to manage the collapse by controlling the calories. Control the food, and you control the people. It is the oldest leverage in the history of human civilization. This is why we focus on the unsexy assets, the mundane, the tangible. Seeds that are not hybrids, meaning you can replant them. Salt, which is essential for preserving meat when the grid fails. Honey, which never spoils and acts as a dense energy source and an antibacterial agent. These are not just items on a shopping list. They are the bedrock of survival economics. We are peeling back the skin of the economy to show you the bone. And the bone is brittle. The global food system is teetering on the edge of a mathematical abyss, driven by fertilizer shortages, geopolitical conflict, and currency debasement. When the dollar loses its purchasing power, foreign nations will stop sending us their bananas and their coffee and their beef. They will keep it for themselves, and we will be left with paper rectangles that no longer command the respect of the world. Prepare your mind for the reality of caloric deflation. Prepare for a world where your status is determined not by the brand of your car, but by the fullness of your larder. The autopsy is clear. The patient is malnourished, the circulation is failing, and the trauma is imminent. Do not be the one standing in the empty aisle with a fistful of useless currency, wondering where the trucks went. Be the one who understood that the only true wealth is the energy required to stay alive. Imagine this. It is 4 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. The air is cold, but the heating in your house has been off for 3 weeks because the grid is undergoing what the authorities call rolling load management. You are awake because you are hungry. Not the hunger of missing lunch, but the deep, gnawing metabolic panic of a body that has been running on a caloric deficit for 100 days. You are looking at your bank account on a phone with 6% battery remaining. The screen shows you possess $3 million. Now, look out the window. A truck pulls up to the neighbor's driveway. It is not a delivery truck. It is painted a dull, bureaucratic gray. Men in uniforms that are a hybrid of police and military step out. They are not there to arrest a criminal. They are there to audit a pantry. This is the moment the illusion of nominal wealth shatters against the concrete wall of biological reality. We are reaching the final stage of our forensic examination. The patient, the global economic order, is showing advanced signs of systemic organ failure. We have moved past the point of monetary inflammation and are now observing necrotic tissue in the supply chain. This is not fiction. This is the mathematical inevitability of a system that has severed the link between currency and energy. We need to conduct a brutal audit of what you think you own. Most of you are hoarding the wrong assets. You have been conditioned by 50 years of unprecedented peace and logistical miracles to believe that wealth is a number on a server. You believe that if you have enough zeros next to your name, you can always trade those zeros for calories. That is a fatal assumption. In the forensic history of economic collapses, from the Weimar Republic to Zimbabwe, from the fall of Rome to the siege of Sarajevo, there is a singular, terrifying pattern that emerges. It is the inversion of value. During the collapse, the things you cherish, the luxury watch, the vintage car, the stack of unbacked fiat currency, even the gold bar, lose their liquidity. You cannot eat a Patek Philippe. You cannot burn a stack of stock certificates to keep your children warm. Or rather, you can, but it is an incredibly inefficient source of thermal energy. The autopsy reveals that in the final stages of a currency crisis, the only asset class that retains par value is the asset that produces energy. I am talking about the soil. I am talking about the biological machinery that turns sunlight into glucose. However, we must apply a contrarian filter to this observation. The standard survivalist advice is to buy land. Go rural. Buy a farm. While this is logically sound, it ignores the predatory nature of a dying state. When a government faces an existential crisis, when the capital city is starving and the riots are threatening the seat of power, the government does not dissolve. It tightens. It becomes a vacuum for resources. Recall the United States Executive Order 6102, signed in 1933. The government criminalized the possession of monetary gold. They confiscated it to recapitalize the banking system. Now, I want you to run a simulation in your mind for the year 2025 or 2030. Gold is a relic. It is not the strategic reserve that keeps a population docile. Food is. If you own 1,000 acres of productive farmland and the cities are starving, do you truly believe the state will respect your property deed? A deed is a piece of paper enforced by a court system that relies on the very stability that is collapsing. When the caloric deficit hits the critical mass, your title to the land will be superseded by Emergency Food Security Acts or National Resource Redistribution Orders. This is the Ouroboros of tyranny. The state creates the inflation that destroys the food supply chain and then uses the starvation caused by that inflation as the justification to seize the means of production. So, what is the verdict? The verdict is that you must achieve tangible sovereignty. Tangible sovereignty is not just ownership. It is the operational capacity to produce and defend value without reliance on external grids. It is not enough to own the land. You must be the operator of the land. If you are a passive investor in farmland, you are a target for confiscation. If you are the one who knows how to fix the tractor, how to cycle the crops, how to treat the infection in the livestock, you become an asset to the community rather than a parasite to be liquidated. We are looking at a future where the definition of liquid assets returns to its literal meaning: clean water, fuel, and antibiotics. Let us look at the exchange rate in a collapsed economy. In the siege of Sarajevo, a Bic lighter was worth more than a stack of gold rings. Why? Because a lighter provides immediate, tangible utility. It creates fire. Fire cooks food. Fire boils water. Fire signals life. Gold just sits there, looking pretty, waiting for a market that no longer exists. You need to diversify out of the illusion nominal, stocks, bonds, fiat currencies, and into the functional real. This includes antibiotics. The shelf life of common antibiotics is the timeline of your survival in a post-hospital world. A simple infection, something that costs $12 to treat today, becomes a death sentence when the pharmacy supply chains break. In the forensic analysis of a collapsed society, the man with a stockpile of amoxicillin has more leverage than the man with a stockpile of Bitcoin. This is uncomfortable to hear, I know. You want me to tell you which stock ticker to buy. You want a ticker symbol that will go to the moon. But we are not talking about going to the moon. We are talking about staying on Earth when the atmosphere catches fire. The math is brutal. The average city has a 3-day supply of food. That is 72 hours. After that, the social contract evaporates. The veneer of civilization is exactly 9 meals thick. Once those 9 meals are missed, you are no longer dealing with citizens. You are dealing with biological desperate entities. We are observing the terminal velocity of the fiat experiment. The average life expectancy of a fiat currency is 27 years. The US dollar has been unmoored from gold since 1971. Do the arithmetic. We are living on borrowed time. The protocol for you, the jury in this autopsy, is to audit your own life. Look at your assets. How many of them rely on a counterparty to honor a promise? If the power goes out, if the internet fractures, if the banks declare a holiday, what do you actually own? If the answer is nothing, you are already a casualty. You just haven't hit the ground yet. We must build local, anti-fragile networks. You cannot survive this as a lone wolf. The lone wolf starves or is hunted. The pack survives. You need a community of producers, a network of trade where trust is backed by reputation and physical collateral, not by a credit score agency. This is the end of the autopsy. The body of the old economy is dead. It is just twitching because of the electricity being pumped into it by the central banks. Do not mistake those spasms for life. Prepare your larder. Secure your energy. Learn a skill that cannot be confiscated. If you are tracking the liquidity injection from the central planners and you understand that the helicopter money is just fuel for the fire, drop a helicopter emoji in the comments so I know you are monitoring the situation from above. Class dismissed.